In the week the US national debt crossed the astronomical $40 trillion mark, the US has paid the highest borrowing cost to sell 30-year bonds since 2001 as investors fret over the country's mounting debt pile under Donald Trump's administration. A $25 billion Treasury auction of 30-year bonds drew yields as high as 5.22%. It marked the highest yield since the 5.52% paid in 2001, after which 30-year auctions were suspended for almost 5 years. The national debt and the cost of borrowing have roughly doubled over the past decade, fueled by vast spending during the coronavirus pandemic. The government now spends more on servicing its debt than it does on national defense. Trump returned to office, vowing to bring America's public finances under control, but nominal debt has since risen at its fastest rate outside of the COVID era, after the administration pushed through sweeping tax cut legislation with the president's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. The US has been able to become an empire as it sold debt that was considered a safe haven. US long-term bonds were for long the world's safest asset, but now the US is struggling to sell them and is being forced to offer higher yields. This means trust in US bonds is declining, and this means the American empire is having to pay ever more to maintain its empire. It has been 5 years since the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan, and something surprising has happened. Afghanistan is relatively peaceful. After more than 4 decades of almost continuous conflict, terrorist attacks have fallen dramatically. Roads are safer, and the Taliban have established control across virtually the entire country. They have also proven more capable at governing than many expected. Government revenues have risen to around $4 billion a year. Corruption at lower levels has been reduced, and much of the bureaucracy inherited from the previous government continues to function. But there is a geopolitical paradox here. The Taliban spent 20 years fighting to remove America and establish their own state. They achieved that objective, but they now face the much harder challenge of turning military victory into a viable country. Afghanistan remains desperately poor, largely isolated from the international financial system and starved of foreign investment. Aid has collapsed, while the Taliban reportedly spend around half of government revenue on security. Their restrictions on women, particularly the ban on girls' secondary education, have also made international normalization much more difficult. Meanwhile, relations with neighboring Pakistan have deteriorated badly over Islamabad's accusations that Afghanistan shelters the Pakistani Taliban. So Afghanistan illustrates an important geopolitical lesson. Winning a war and successfully governing the peace are two very different things. The Taliban defeated the world's most powerful military alliance and consolidated Afghanistan under one government. But unless they can turn stability into investment, trade, and economic development, their greatest achievement may simply be creating a peaceful but impoverished Afghanistan. This week marks 79 years since the partition of British India, creating India and Pakistan. Yet nearly 8 decades later, the geopolitical problems created in 1947 remain remarkably unresolved. Polling around the partition anniversary showed populations on both sides continuing to perceive the other as their greatest external threat. Partition created 2 states whose geography, security, and national identities immediately placed them in competition. The most important unresolved issue was Kashmir, which resulted in their first war within months of independence and remains disputed today. Since then, India and Pakistan have fought multiple wars, built nuclear arsenals, and developed military strategies largely designed around each other. But the balance of power has changed dramatically. India has emerged as one of the world's largest economies and increasingly views China, rather than Pakistan, as its principal long-term strategic competitor. Pakistan faces a different problem. India's much larger population, economy, and conventional military mean Islamabad cannot realistically match New Delhi symmetrically. This has encouraged Pakistan to rely on nuclear deterrence, its military establishment, and its strategic relationship with China to maintain the balance. And this is what makes the rivalry so difficult to resolve. The dispute is no longer simply about Kashmir. It has become embedded within the wider Asian balance of power. China backs Pakistan, while the United States increasingly views India as an important counterweight to China. The British Empire disappeared from the subcontinent, but the strategic rivalry its departure helped create remains very much alive.